Hello everyone, welcome back to the Anatomy Lab. Today we're going to be looking at more muscles of the upper extremity with a focus on the forearm today. So, here's the forearm, and as we recall, it is from the elbow down to the wrist. The forearm is going to be mostly organized into flexors and extensors, which are roughly going to be on the anterior and posterior sides. But to start off with looking at muscles on the forearm, I would look for this large V-shaped organization. This right here, between these two muscles, is a big V shape or V organization. There are two muscles that you should be able to locate here, which is going to include the Pronator Teres and then the brachioradialis. If we go from either side from the brachioradialis to the Pronator Teres, we'll be able to see the muscles of the posterior side, which are mostly extensors, or the muscles of the anterior side, which are mostly flexors. So let's get started with the flexors first. So like we saw, this is the Pronator Teres. Right next to the Pronator Teres, this is where you're going to find the flexor Carpi radialis. And its name suggests a lot, which is going to be flexor, which is going to tell you that it's flex or due flexion. Carpi, meaning that it's going to go to the carpals. And then radialis means that it's going to be on the side of the radius, which is going to be on the side of the thumb. So flexor Carpi radialis is going to tell you a lot about the muscle. In the middle, this is the Palmaris longus. So right next to the flexor Carpi radialis, you have the Palmaris longus. The Palmaris longus is going to be going to your palm across the flexor retinaculum. And being on the anterior side, it is going to help with flexion of the wrist. So when it pulls on the palm, it's going to help with flexing the wrist or pulling the wrist forward like this. Now, going even further to the medial side of the forearm, right next to the Palmaris longus, this is the flexor Carpi ulnaris. And once again, its name is going to tell you a lot. Flexor, flexion, Carpi to the wrist bones, and ulnaris on the side of the ulnar or on the side of the pinky. Now, the flexor Carpi radialis as well as the flexor Carpi ulnaris are going to have one shared action, which, like the Palmaris longus, is going to help with flexing the wrist. But depending on the side of the hand or a side of the forearm that it's going to be on, it is going to pull the hand in a certain direction. So the flexor Carpi radialis is going to pull the hand this way towards the outside or laterally. This is going to be abduction. And then the flexor Carpi ulnaris is going to be helping pulling the hand inward or medially to give you hand adduction. So make sure that you're careful with the actions of these two muscles, but know that they also have that shared action as well. Now, deep to these anterior muscles, there are a couple of layers of muscles that you should know as well. So first of all, you remember that these are the muscles that we looked at. Underneath these three muscles, you'll be able to see muscle fibers underneath them, which you can see here. So between the Palmaris longus and the flexor Carpi ulnaris, or the Palmaris longus and the flexor Carpi radialis, you see these muscle fibers which are going in different directions from those. These muscles are the intermediate layers of the forearm muscles. This is the Flexor Digitorum superficialis. And although you can see a little bit here, you can see a lot more of it if you take this off and take a look. So you can see the muscle starting up here and extending downward to kind of look like a flat muscle over here. But underneath the Flexor Digitorum superficialis, there are two more muscles that you need to learn as well. This one right underneath it, this is the Flexor Digitorum profundus. Now both of the muscles that we just talked about, the Flexor Digitorum superficialis as well as the Flexor Digitorum profundus, are going to help with flexing the digits, so bending the digits or fingers inward like this. So they're going to have a slightly different actions, so make sure that you understand those as well. But right next to it on the medial side of the Flexor Digitorum profundus, this is the flexor Pollicis longus. So Pollicis is it's going to be referring to the Pollicis portion, and the pollex is the thumb. So this is going to help with flexing the thumb. Flexor, Palmaris Longus. And once again, the location of this muscle is going to help with identifying the action of the muscle as well. Now, those are the anterior muscles of the forearm. We also have the posterior muscles of the forearm as well. So first of all, this one we already learned, and we can identify it because of the V shape that we looked at previously with the Pronator Teres and the Brachioradialis. Now, something to be careful of really quickly is that the Brachioradialis is technically visible from the anterior side as well as the posterior side. But this is a good muscle to start off with to start looking at the posterior muscles or the extensors. So here's the Brachioradialis, and from the Brachioradialis moving more posteriorly, this is going to be the Extensor Carpi Radialis Longus. So right next to it. And then right next to that, there's an associated muscle, which is the Extensor Carpi Radialis Brevis. So you have two muscles which are associated with each other, Extensor Carpi Radialis Longus and Extensor Carpi Radialis Brevis. Moving more medially and posteriorly, this will be the Extensor Digitorum. And the Extensor Digitorum is going to help with extension, being on the posterior side, but it is going to help with extension of the digits. So you can see the tendon going to the fingers or the digits. This is also going to be a muscle that you could use its name to figure out what it does. And then just like the organization on the flexor side, we also have an Extensor Carpi Ulnaris. The Extensor Carpi Ulnaris is going to be located right here. So be careful of the muscles that you don't need to know, though. Just make sure that you can identify the ones that we have. Extensor Carpi Radialis Longus, Extensor Carpi Radialis Brevis, skip a couple muscles here, and then Extensor Digitorum, and then skip one muscle over here to get to the Extensor Carpi Ulnaris. Now, the actions of the Extensor Carpi Radialis Longus and Extensor Carpi Radialis Brevis, as well as the Extensor Carpi Ulnaris, is going to have one shared action, just like on the flexor side. That is going to be extension of the wrist. So bringing the wrist back like this, or extension of the wrist. But just like last time, there's also going to be side-dependent actions, which will be for the Extensor Carpi Radialis. Or let's take a look at it this way. Abduction of the wrist, and then for the Extensor Carpi Ulnaris, adduction of the wrist. And those are all the muscles that we're going to look at for the forearm today. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.